I'd like to call the Board of Education meeting for Wednesday, December 13th, 2017 to order. Can we have a roll call, please? Mr. Arcandro.
Yes. Mrs. Witkowski.
Here.
Mr. Gamble.
Here.
Mr. Nielsen.
Here.
Mrs. Evans.
Here.
Mrs. Larson is not here?
She's excused. She may come later.
Okay. Mr. Lewis. Here. And I am here.
Thank you. And the meeting has been properly posted. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lewis. Is there a second? Second. Second by Mrs. Witkowski. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4 is community comment. Would anyone like to make any comment tonight? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, consent agenda. Would any board member like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lewis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Gamble. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, school board announcements. Are there any announcements? Okay, hearing none. We'll move on to item 7, the school board calendar. We have a regular meeting on Wednesday, January 10th, 2018 here at the ECC at 6 o'clock p.m. And pardon my voice, I have a cold tonight, I'm sorry. And we have a regular board meeting on Wednesday, January 24th, 2018 here at the ECC at 6 o'clock p.m. Item 8 is reports and presentations. 8A is the Teaching and Learning Report, Annual Assessment Report from Mr. Cohen and Mr. Reuter.
Good evening. You should have a copy of the updated report in board docs, and we are going to just project a few items behind you. So this evening we have a couple unique opportunities. Mr. Reuter and I are going to start with a district overview of the annual assessment report and give you some of the highlights, talk about the state report card, and talk about some areas of strength and growth from a district perspective and what our action steps have been this year to try to address some of those. And then you'll have an opportunity to hear from the principals in terms of their specific buildings. And so we're excited to present that information to you tonight. I wanted to note that the assessment report is being presented earlier than it has in previous years. Generally, the assessment report is presented in April, and we made the decision to move it to fall moving forward. We feel like it provides some continuity for us in terms of the action plans that you hear about late summer, early fall from a district and building perspective. And it also is just a more kind of timely approach to looking at the data. You're not a full academic year removed from the data. It's only a few months. The state has gotten the data out to a public release faster this year than they have in previous years, and so that's allowed us to back up. And we're going to make the assumption that they're going to do that moving forward so that we can continue to report this time of year. So we wanted to start by just highlighting some kind of key notes in terms of the state report card. Last year, Mr. Reuter and I went through a detailed overview of what each section of the report card meant and what it looked like. But tonight, I want to just kind of refresh your memory on that and then highlight some of the things that we were seeing from a district perspective. This is the district report card. It's not displayed around the room tonight. The building ones are, which is why we're highlighting this. And just to run you through the sections again, student achievement measures student data on the state standardized assessments, the ACT, and the forward exam over a 3-year span. So it essentially takes the percentage of students or the amount of students who are in each category from advanced to proficient on down, and then adds a multiplier, calculates a set of points, and that's how they arrive at student achievement. And again, that measures the English language arts score and then the mathematics score on those assessments. The district growth metric endeavors to measure how students performed the prior year in the state assessment and then how they performed the following year in the state assessment. So in other words, this past academic year, how did students do on the forward compared to how they had done the previous year in the previous grade level? And that calculation is done by the UW-Madison Research Group. And I'm going to point to some specific information DPI sent us about the growth score here in a little bit. The third category is closing gaps. And so that category looks at some specific subgroups and compares how those subgroups do in your district compared to the opposite groups statewide. So for example, if you're looking at students who are classified as low socioeconomic status in Franklin, it compares how that group of students performs over 5 years compared to students of above or higher socioeconomic status statewide. So the opposite subgroup. And what the state's looking for is, are your students in that subgroup achieving and closing gaps faster than the state opposite subgroup is? In other words, you're accounting for groups that have traditionally underperformed on state assessments, and your education of those students is moving them or advancing them faster than the state is the opposite subgroup. In that category, closing gaps, it takes into account not only English language arts and mathematics, but also graduation rate at the high school. So you'll notice the district and high school report cards have that piece. You'll also notice that the HOC is accounted for in the district report card, but not the high school report card, which is why you might see some variance between the high school score and the district score. The fourth category then, on track for post-secondary readiness, looks at some key indicators of student success beyond high school and future predictors of student achievement. So they look at high school graduation rate, they look at district or building attendance rate, and then they look at third grade English language arts and eighth grade mathematics. So those achievement scores count not only in the student achievement section, but then also down here on the on track for post-secondary readiness section. So those scores are double counted.
So is this where we see a graduation rate where we are below the state because of the...
You got it. Yeah, because the House of Corrections is accounted for in that data. And then finally, there are some student engagement indicators, primarily centered on absenteeism rate and dropout rate. And as long as you're below what the state identifies as some key levels, there's no deduction in the state report card. If you're above, then there is a deduction on the state report card. If you recall, the high school had received a deduction last year due to a participation rate in the assessments. For this state report card and moving forward, the state has removed that metric, so that is no longer counted on the state report card in the deduction section. I want to circle back to the district growth number for just a minute. The state had released some information to districts in early November saying that they were seeing a larger than expected variance in those scores. In other words, there were districts, a good number of them, that either were 10 points higher than they had been the previous year or 10 points lower than they had been the previous year. Or more. And the state had identified that was a larger than expected swing, given the statistics and the formula they were using to calculate that data, and cautioned districts around really analyzing that score too deeply and stop just short of saying, this isn't really a valid score, right? They didn't come out and say that, but they kind of approached that line of like, these scores are not what we would expect. So kind of take them with a grain of salt. They also told us not to compare the growth score year to year because of the constant changes and tweaks that they make to that equation. They said looking at the prior year compared to this year is probably not a valid comparison. The data doesn't really compare. So they said kind of take it for what it's worth in this go round. Next year it'll be slightly different. And so try to dig into that data. I'll also point out that the growth metric is the only one where we don't see the formula. So for student achievement and for closing gaps, we can see how the state is calculating and arriving at those scores. We don't see that for growth. It's kind of done behind closed doors in Madison. They don't release that formula. So we're not privy to kind of that final calculation. I highlighted, and I'll highlight again, that the report card uses 3 to 5 years of data, depending on the category. And so that varies, but again, it's designed to not be a one-year snapshot. It's really looking at multiple cohort groups. Obviously, with the forward exam, we've only had the forward exam for 2 years. And so WKC and Badger, last year was WKC, Badger, and forward. This year it was Badger, and then 2 years of forward. Next year's state report card will be 3 years of forward. And then the high school, this is really one of the first times we have multiple years of ACT across all of those calculations.
So question for you, Nick. You obviously stated that the DPI doesn't share the formula. We don't necessarily know what goes into the formula. They suggest that we don't compare year to year. But we have, if we look face to face on what this category shows. Last year, an 85 out of 100. This year, a 67 out of 100. You know, a 13-point and a 15-point drop basically in both those two categories. What do they expect us to do without providing background information? What goes into the formula? How are they expecting us to fix whatever issue lies in the student growth, or as they labeled it, in the 16-17 district growth formula?
Sure. So in a lot of ways, the state report card is a culmination of months of data that we've looked at to that point. So we don't rely on it as kind of the sole source of indicators for us. We can track student growth year to year, just internally in terms of how did our students perform in third grade, how are they now performing in fourth grade, and we have that data. Even though we can't calculate it to a final score, we can identify at certain grade levels if we're seeing, you know what, this wasn't really the kind of growth we expected, or it doesn't appear that there was a full grade level of growth for multiple groups of students. We can kind of attack that and address that, and I think you'll hear that from multiple principals tonight as they talk about kind of their own building level data and how they identify those pockets and what they're doing to try to support and address that. So yeah, you're right, we don't have any way really of addressing the metric that goes into that score, but we can track year to year how our own students are doing.
So are we potentially seeing a similar trend in the data that we can view year to year, that we see a gap in growth from third to fourth, whatever, grade level progression we're
Yeah,
looking at?
I think there were a couple key areas we'll highlight tonight where we did see some of that, and we'll talk about that, I think, in a little more detail.
Okay, thanks.
And is that like in pages like 6, 7, 8, you're going to cover those?
Yeah, I'm not going to go page by page through the report. You'll hear some of that from the principals tonight as they talk about their individual buildings. But yes, you're correct. That's where you look at the report. Those year-over-year
They all look
scores. Are
like
what you're
they're
reporting.
somewhat less from last year's.
Is there a particular page you're looking at as we're coming?
Page 7, we have middle of the page, current 9th grade students. 15, 16, there was 60.8 that were proficient or above, and now this year it's 46.7. Math, the same thing happened. Current 8th grade students, less for ELA, same thing happened, math. So this kind of maybe is reflective of what you would.
Yeah, 7th and 8th grade were two of the grade levels where we saw some dips in that year-over-year score. And again, I think we'll highlight some of that tonight. But yeah, you're correct. Those are the types of things we're seeing.
Can I ask, how are you conveying this to parents besides just posting it on the web, or, you know, they have the same questions, you know, what happened? And so they're not, you know, some might go to DPI and see what they wrote in the explanation, but are we doing that? Are we conveying?
Yeah, I think we always try to give each assessment the appropriate amount of attention in terms of parent communication. You know, the state report card is one of those things that's really fairly complex to understand. So we try to provide, you know, an overview and provide some information about here's how you can access the scores, here's the information and what these categories mean. But short of having these face-to-face conversations, it's really pretty difficult to in-depth be able to explain some of those pieces. Certainly if the principals have questions, they would address them with parents and try to highlight them. And we would always encourage parents to ask questions if they have them. But to try to find a mass communication or something we can post that would kind of cover the complexity of some of this becomes very difficult for us. So we try to do the best we can to say, here's what we're seeing, here's what we're working on, here are the things that we're pretty proud of, and provide the information, the data as these sources come out, right? We're providing ACT reports to parents for individual students. We're providing board exam reports to students. There's a description that comes with each of those that highlights certain sections of that data. So we try to provide, you know, that individual level of data that supports kind of the global data we're seeing.
The last question I had and I was going to bring up is the House of Corrections issue with the data being included district-wide but not the high school level. Have there been continuing discussions on what's the right avenue to look at those numbers? Is it an adequate or appropriate measure to include them with district data compared to other districts?
Yeah. We would argue not, right?
And that argument has been made, correct?
Yes, multiple times.
And why, what's the argument for putting it in?
really the House of Correction Education program is run by the district. So we provide that education to those students, and the state sees it as a part of the Franklin Public School District. And so that data is included in the district report. We're not the only school district. There are a couple other districts in the state that have a similar concern.
What are they? They're not hardly getting the same curriculum that someone in a high school is, are they?
No, I mean, we have multiple pathways at the HOC to college or to high school equivalency, right? So it isn't just about graduating. We do have some graduates. They get their own state report card. It's an alternative report card, and they met satisfactory progress again this year. So every year that the state report card's been issued, we've come back with satisfactory progress, which tells us we're doing the right things there in terms of moving students forward. The other thing I guess I would highlight is, though it is included, it's not a significant metric, right? You take a look at that 87.3, for example. Even though that graduation rate of 33.1 is below the state average, the overall score is still relatively high. So it doesn't have a significant impact on that score. The other thing is it's not included in the high school score, right? So if you're kind of a parent, a prospective parent looking at the high school, you're seeing that separately from the district score. So certainly we've advocated for it to not be included. At the same time, it's not having a significant impact on the score overall. So we wanted to spend a few minutes highlighting some of our strengths in the data, and we certainly have a lot to be proud of. I think sometimes when we look at data sources, we kind of jump to the growth areas or the areas that we need to improve. And certainly we recognize those, and we'll talk about those, but we have to also recognize we're still a high-performing district, right? And not only one of the top-performing districts regionally, but in the state overall. Our achievement scores are incredibly high, and our students continue to perform at a high level, K-12, really, regardless of grade level. The other thing that I'll point to is, the ACT data versus ACT Aspire. It's an interesting dichotomy because you look at the ACT data and you see that over the last 3 years, the scores have dropped slightly year over year. It's important to recognize that those are kind of independent groups of students, right? We're not looking at a trend over time with the same groups of students. We're looking at a group of students in isolation on the one exam, then the next year is the next group of students in isolation on the one exam. And certainly we don't want to see a downtrend in those numbers in that data, and we recognize that and continue to explore it. But really the data we value the most is the year-over-year progression, right? How do students do, how did they do last year compared to the prior year compared to the prior year? And are we continuing to see growth in our students? And I'd point to the ACT Aspire chart on the right to say, these are our current juniors. The 15-16 scores, how they performed in 9th grade. The 16-17 scores, how they performed in 10th grade. And you're seeing almost across the board that students were either stable or increasing in achievement on the ACT Aspire, right? So we're looking at that and seeing, all right, not only are students meeting grade level progression, but we're seeing growth over time. And we would expect that growth would continue into the ACT, right? And so, as we look all the way down to forward, you're going to see that as well in the report. Same types of growth, right? We're looking at year over year, our students achieving at a higher rate in subsequent years. And we'll continue to monitor that. And again, we stand behind that as a good sign that we're making progress with students.
Just a quick question. Is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
supposed to be the same data that's on page 5? Or
6.
Page 6. On the bottom chart. One of the other strength areas we wanted to highlight is, the assessment report doesn't only show our standardized test data, but we also include other metrics of college and career readiness, including, number of students who are earning professional certifications, the types of areas those certifications are in, the number of students who are going out and having community-based experiences through either internship or youth apprenticeship. And as we continue our commitment to education for employment and to students having rich, community-based, authentic experiences to help forward their learning from an academic and career planning standpoint, we feel like those are metrics we need to continue to watch and look at and monitor to make sure that we're making progress and hitting our goals around that data. And so, again, I would point to, due to our capstone courses that you've approved in a number of areas, from business to face to tech ed to biomed to our inroads program, we're having the opportunity to provide students with a lot of community-based, rich experiences, and you're seeing those numbers go up year over year, and that's something that we continue to be proud of.
Another area of celebration is you'll see the consistent growth in forward data at grades 3 through 6 from last year to this year. As the principals share this evening, our literacy scores have increased, which led to our elementary scores increasing across the district. We attributed that to a lot of factors. One, high expectations by our teachers daily in Writer's Workshop last year, the change in curriculum, a belief around balanced literacy. You've heard early on this school year, our work this year with Reader's Workshop, so we have a continued expectation of growth in the realm of literacy, not just at K-6, but you'll hear from each of the principals how they're focusing on literacy specifically in their buildings this year through their action plans. As well as last year, we changed the role of the literacy system specialists, our coaches in the district. They previously had dual roles as interventionists and coaches, working with students and teachers, and that was a very difficult task to be spread thin, and we isolated and targeted our coaches specifically to work with teachers across the district at specific grade levels. So at the K-8 level, we have coaches in literacy at K-1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, 8, so they can become masters of the craft of instruction and curriculum at those specific grade bands instead of understanding 7 levels of curriculum and the expectations around that. So we attribute those changes structurally as well as a strategy-based approach to coaching teachers and that professional development that's ongoing. So those are things we continue to build on, and we reflect on why we see those scores happening in that matter of that growth at K-6 and how those changes in strategy have affected our overall success and how we can spread that as we continue to grow scores across the district.
So quick question on the ACT Aspire, just to follow kind of on Linda's point earlier. So we have on page 6 the 10th grade results, and the top of page 7 is the, sorry, that's 9th and 10th?
Yeah,
On the bottom
so
of page 6?
yes, correct.
And top of 7 is solely 10th?
So let's start with 6. Bottom page 6 is current juniors. So it's showing how that group of juniors performed in 9th grade and then how
Gotcha.
they performed in 10th grade.
Okay.
The next page, top of page 7, is our current 10th graders and how they performed in 9th grade.
Okay.
Question, then what is on the top of page 5? All of Franklin High School, or?
Top of page 5 was how the students performed in the ACT, so just their junior year.
So is the top of page 7, the current sophomores' stats, do we have, is this kind of the first year that we have this data? We don't necessarily have anything to compare it to?
Right, we don't have, the first year they take the ACT Aspire Summative is in 9th grade.
Okay, so potentially what you're hopefully showing over time on the bottom of page 6, current juniors versus current sophomores, is potentially growth between sophomore and junior year in those percentages?
Between really freshman and junior.
Freshman, junior, okay.
So as a district, we believe in continuous improvement, and when looking at continuous improvement, we have to obviously look at the areas that we need to grow. And there's some glaring data this year as we look at per building and across the district. One area that we are still studying and analyzing is the declining literacy scores at Forest Park in 7th and 8th grade. It's the only building in the district where there's 50% turnover of student population year to year. We look at that as a factor as well. Mrs. King, Mr. Miziak, and Taylor Gold, our literacy coach, and I and Mr. Cohen have done a lot of analysis of why there was such a drastic drop, and to be quite transparent and honest, we're not sure. So rather than focusing on not being sure, we're looking at what we can do to improve the level of expectation, the rigor of the work we do, and the ongoing professional development of our English and literacy teachers at the middle school level. Mrs. King and Mr. Miziak will share more specifically when you do your walk around of the building-wide focus on literacy this year, the professional development that's happening with their staff. And one of the areas that we feel very confident that the middle school will improve over time their literacy scores on forward is because we finally have a K-6 curriculum that students will be feeding into the middle school that's aligned with the middle school curriculum. For instance, often 7th graders are asked to call back to a 5th grade experience in Readers or Writers Workshop that they never experienced. So we have we had previously different expectations at different grade levels across the district, and so now this next year will be the first year that our district literacy curriculum is aligned K-8, and we hope that will be, and we know that will be one of the factors that will help trend that data in the other direction. Mrs. King and Mr. Miziak, though, will go into more detail with their poster session about the work they're doing with their staff around those declining scores. Another area of growth, and I shared, if I referenced the September 27th board meeting, I spoke with you as we talked, Nick and I shared our continuous improvement process around curriculum review, and last year we did a deep root cause analysis of our district math data. This wasn't a surprise as this data came out, as we've looked historically over the last 10 to 15 years of our data. It's been either stagnant or trending in the wrong direction for us as Franklin Public Schools and as a high-performing district. And the numbers are pretty available in the document that Nick shared with you, and I think Ms. Witkowski, Mr. Lewis, you've already made mention to page 7 as we look at specifically 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, the downward decline, and then from the forward exam data, and then as we look at ACT data. So as you remember back on September 27th, I talked about last year as a year of study, looking at areas of focus as a department and what we need to do to improve. It's not as easy as transactionally just buying a different curriculum and hoping that happens. We spent this year really prioritized around 3 main goals, and that's content and standard prioritization, K-12, a group of teachers as well as math specialists and administration came to the conclusion through both qualitative and quantitative data analysis that we teach a lot of stuff in math, but we don't go deep into standards. So by looking at our alignment of college and career readiness standards and the expectations of those, as well as the Common Core K-12, we're working right now on our district level PD days and with small cohorts of teachers to prioritize our standards and go deeper into the work in the near future so that kids have a rich math experience, as well as looking at how we assess kids and our rubrics and how we utilize those so that we have high expectations for students, as well as different assessment modes other than just a piece of paper and pencil, but how are we applying mathematical practices to real life. So Mr. Lewis did a classroom visit, I believe, with Mr. Zambras a few weeks ago, and he shared one of the real life examples. We're trying to include those rich practical examples of I can solve an algorithm, great, but how can I apply that to a home reconstruction project, and how am I using math daily so that math isn't something that I learned for that day and then I move on, and when the test comes, can't recall what to do, but I understand the application of math long term in my life. As well as we're looking at the process of student acceleration and intervention, and I shared some of this in the gifted report update as well in September around our current acceleration processes for math acceleration, looking at from not only a gifted lens, but a universal lens that we wait until the end of 6th grade to determine placement at the middle school for acceleration. It's the belief of the math root cause team, we have to have high levels of expectations for all kids in math, and if kids are ready to be challenged at an earlier age, then those are things that we're going to be put in place as we review and think about future endeavors for curriculum and instruction when it comes to math. So as I shared on the getting my dates mixed up, the 26th, we decided we weren't moving forward with any recommendations for new courses at the high school because we're engaging this whole year in a continued year of study so that we're not making hasty decisions based on data, some specific data points on new curriculum and new instructional practices. So we'll continue to study through this year. We're looking at what other high-performing school districts are using as far as curriculum, K-12. We're going to be engaging teachers in some site visits, understanding and interviewing other districts of what they're doing, looking at standardized and qualitative data, and then we'll come to the board with recommendations for possible new courses at the middle and high school level and curriculum adoption for next year in November.
Looking at the data and how much potentially that it's changed year over year, and looking back to, what was it, maybe 2 months ago when you presented the kind of the curriculum plan, the 5-year plan, are you concerned at all that a 5-year plan may not necessarily address issues quick enough?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Mr. Lewis, because I think at the time we had switched 4 years ago to a yearly review,
right,
which then we're making wholesale changes every year. So it's that balance of looking at data from multiple viewpoints, and do we have to speed up a process? Or in this case, in math, we don't want to make a hasty decision and then we made a wrong decision and making changes again year after year. So the essence of the framework is 5 years, but that doesn't mean there isn't flexibility within that framework to speed up or slow down as needed. And then some of that's teacher capacity and load. You think about an elementary teacher in the school district, they teach every subject. If every year we're changing a curriculum, they're changing, and we've heard from community as well, some of the concern around 1 year's writing, then reading, then math, and science, and social studies every year is a change. How am I becoming a master at my craft? So we have to take all those factors in, just like we take in factors of students and their learning capacity and what cognitively they can take in, the people instructing them, we have to do the same.
And with that, we've heard quite a bit over the past couple months about extracurricular activities, lunchtime, recess time, how much time devoted to the arts and art class, music class, and then how much devoted to in-classroom instruction. As we go through kind of a very rigorous analysis of all this data, how relevant are those discussions with curriculum, with data, with time in the classroom? How frequently do we look at the totality of the circumstances, what we can do to increase, obviously, our scores across the board, but at the same time benchmark, like I think we've discussed with other districts, other areas of the country where it truly is a case study of whether or not there is more recess time versus classroom instruction and vice versa, and the results that are tied to both of those case studies. You know, how in-depth have we truly looked at the correlation between classroom time versus results and creative time versus results?
That's good.
Yeah, I was going to say, just I'll kind of speak broadly to that, and then maybe Mr. Reuter can speak more specifically. Like, as we think about the year of study that we've engaged in and the types of things we're engaging in study around, we're trying to get more of a holistic view of what's happening, right? So we're engaging a year of study around personalized learning, we're engaging a year of study around systems of support, right? We're social emotional learning. So we're looking at kind of the big picture, and our hope is that the recommendations that come out of those teams we can bring together and then utilize that as we're working with each curricular area over the next 5 years, right? So if we're going into a year of review with math, for example, we can say, well, here were the recommendations out of personalized learning. How are we incorporating those things? How are we incorporating accounting for social emotional? How are we incorporating and bringing in some of the recommendations around academic and career planning? So the hope is to synthesize that through the review process.
And we have done case studies as we look at specifically at the elementary level with literacy, and we looked at districts that have outperformed us over the course of the history of the state report card. They either have more or at about the same amount of instructional time. They may or may not have afternoon recess, a second recess. Most of them have less encore time than we have. So we can look at that in spreadsheets and paper and then take these numbers and correlate, but we don't know qualitatively the experience those children are having. They may be achieving high, but they might have the same concern, their parent base may have the same concerns we have. So we have those factors we can compare, but ultimately, locally, we have to decide what's right for the kids at Franklin and the employees at Franklin.
And I think it's interesting to note, if you look at building level, K-6 versus the middle school and high school, the achievement levels, at least at those buildings, is fairly significant in terms of a high level, versus where there may be slip middle school, high school. But I think it's interesting at least to go through that discussion of, is it truly based off of how the day is split up, classroom-wise, instruction-wise, arts-wise, and then how is that translatable into the 7th, 8th, and high school level?
You come off an elementary experience of 90 minutes of literacy, and we often forget it's 2 subjects, reading and writing. As Mr. Nelson's staff shared here, we did the sorts of the spelling sorts and did that as well as their shared read aloud, all those things that come off a 90-minute experience to a middle school experience of 60 minutes. So that's a factor we look at and discuss and determine is that something that needs to be reanalyzed.
And then just to confirm, I mean, I'm assuming this analysis is then also incorporated into how we've discussed how the middle school health schedule and block schedule and class schedule is also incorporated as well.
And with all that, we have an obligation to understand the learner. We have to not just study curriculums, but we have to understand the learner and development of the learner. So that's our job to do that.
I'd also point out that trend of higher performing elementaries is not just a Franklin trend, that's a statewide trend.
I at least would say, after looking at the data, hearing you talk today, we have an opportunity at the middle school level to potentially start new with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all included in one building, to potentially think outside the box of how can we structure those days, potentially in a different way than even the house structure was structured, or 60-minute long classes and how that day split up. So at least I would hopefully, and task all of you guys with how do we think about this differently to potentially change the trend that we're seeing.
Just a quick question. I know focus on math and curriculum. How long have we had the Carnegie math?
Yeah, very good question. This will be the conclusion of our 5th year.
It's 5 years ago?
Yeah, time flies. In everyday math, we are on a 2nd edition of it. This will be the 5th year of that, and I think previous was 4 years. So
And Carnegie Math was very computer-based, individualized.
Very computer-based, they're giving you data to individualize as need be through a digital platform, but there's still face-to-face instruction.
So you could identify gaps, because it's all very platform-based as far as.
Possibly, and like any curriculum, there's not a silver bullet, like this is the one that's gonna do it. So curriculums all have research bases and varying degrees of research bases, and those researchers are varied as well, some internally and some externally. So often this term is used and it's not the best, but it's the fidelity of curriculum, and when we take something and maneuver it to make it fit the way we feel it should be and don't stay true to a research base, then the research doesn't always play out. So we have to remember that too as we adopt new curriculums. There's autonomy, but also what is the expectation of that curriculum. You're welcome.
The last growth area we point to is one that we've pointed to in the past, and that's our continued gaps in our subgroups, right? And I included a number of different charts for you in the packet that highlight, how students are performing in these subgroups kind of year over year. And it's something that we pay very close attention to, and we continue to have conversations around how to continue to close those gaps and make sure that there are equitable opportunities for all students to achieve at high levels.
Just a quick question on the category of students with a disability. Is that learning disability is just one category? Well, how do you define that group? Is it everybody, or is it learning disability
Yes.
separate?
Any student with an IEP.
Any student with IEP. I really would think that we should, and this is not something you may be able to do, but I just feel learning disability is so much different than a child that has cognitive or, and the group that has a learning disability, an invisible, different way of brain processing gets lumped into, and we don't really know how we're doing with that particular group, which is the largest group in here, in students with disability. I'm looking at the numbers here, it's one.
As a subgroup, yes.
It's one of the higher subgroups.
So we don't really know how that particular group does versus someone that's physically disabled or that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would point to the fact again that, this is kind of the holistic data, right? Like we have individual student reports, we know how individual students are performing, so we can at the local level kind of break that out, and if we need to, break down and analyze certain groups of students, we can do that. So this again is the holistic data. And so lastly, we wanted to just highlight some of the steps that we're taking. You heard Mr. Reuter already talk about math and the year of study that we're engaging in there. I had mentioned already the program review process for us, right, as we think about how we're going to get better as a district and how we're going to address some of those areas for growth. Again, we're engaging in a lot of study this year, right, from personalized learning to systems of support at the high school level and how we're intervening with those students who are struggling academically, to social emotional learning, to our continued implementation of education for employment and academic and career planning. We're continuing to gain a lot of insight and information around the student experience, what the day-to-day is like for students and how it integrates into the curriculum and what those potential impacts might be. And our goal is to synthesize and bring all of that to the table as we continue to analyze our curriculum and our delivery of instruction and how we're approaching those needs. And so it's something that's really important to all of us this year, and something that we'll continue to report on the progress of to this board as we continue to move through the process of study. The other thing that I'll point to is just some changes in the metrics we're using in 7th and 8th grade, as well as 9th and 10th grade. In addition to the summative assessments that you saw around ACT, we do administer, by choice, we enroll in it, the interim assessment, the interim ACT in grades 7, 8, and 9. The ACT Aspire interim mirrors the ACT Aspire summative assessment, but it's shorter bursts of questions, and we get the data almost instantaneously. So it's a nice way for us to kind of do midpoint and early checks in the classroom around questions that are similar to what's being asked on the ACT Aspire, to be able to pull that data into the classroom and use that to help move students forward. And you'll hear the principals potentially talk a little bit about that tonight and how they're using that data. At the 10th grade level, we have made the decision this year to administer the pre-ACT, which, unlike the ACT Aspire, which is computer-based, is a paper-based assessment that mirrors the ACT almost identically. So the testing conditions of the pre-ACT are the same as the ACT. The questions come directly off the ACT into the pre-ACT assessment, and we can administer it any time of year we want, and we get data and results back within 5 to 10 days. And so it's a nice opportunity for us to expose sophomores to kind of the level of rigor on that assessment, and also get some really good information about student learning that we can utilize kind of mid-year to continue to support students and move them forward before they move into junior year and take that ACT test in February. And so we're continuing to look at ways we can use those data sources to benefit us. Obviously, we weigh the use of those assessments against the loss of instructional time. We want to make sure that they're valuable and benefiting students in order to take that time up, and we feel in this case they do. The last thing that I'll point to here then is, obviously this process it's ongoing. But when we get the data in summer, we kind of kick into high gear around our action planning process for the upcoming year, and we involve multiple stakeholders in that process, as you heard us talk about before, from our principal team to our teacher leaders to our staff across the district, and we set some actionable goals as buildings and as a district, and then we work to implement an action plan to carry those out and to monitor them and make adjustments as we need to. And so we have a nice opportunity here in a few minutes to kind of get up and hear from the building principals around how they're targeting these growth areas and seeking to expand on areas of success and the types of goals and action plans that they're engaging in to move students forward.
Can I ask you a question? The work keys assessment?
Yeah.
The 0% flat certificate and the 6% no certificate. Can you comments on that?
Yeah, not a lot, to be honest. Again, it's an individual group of students and how they performed on that assessment on that given day. Obviously, prior to that, we had about a little under 2% of students who were performing kind of at that highest level. And it does appear that there was a little bit of redistribution there and slip back. And we'll continue to watch that year over year. Okay. So we're going to transition then to the next phase of the meeting. And again, we're excited to have the opportunity for you to speak with our principals a little bit about their action planning. So the way it'll work is we're going to have the principals stand by the boards that are scattered around the room. We've got the elementary is kind of on this side. We've got Forest Park over here, and then the high school back here. And we're going to ask that the boards start with the school that they are the liaison for. So that'll be kind of the first stop. And we'll set a timer of about 4 minutes for you to engage. The principals have some prepared remarks they'll share, and then an opportunity for you to ask 1 or 2 questions and get some feedback. Dr. Miller will run a timer, and then there'll be a sound, and that will mean it's time to rotate. And so we will rotate in a clockwise manner to the next station after that. Once we've been to every station, we'll reconvene at the board table, and then we'll open up the opportunity for any final questions from board members to Mr. Reuter or myself regarding the overall assessment report. Okay? And then before we begin, I know Ms. Evans has a quick announcement on procedure.
During this portion of the meeting, citizens are invited to follow a board member as they circulate and interact with a principal. Because this is a legal meeting of the board, only board members may engage in dialogue with the principals and each other. Therefore, citizens are asked to respectfully refrain from asking questions or making comments. Citizens are invited to send any questions or comments they have directly to the building principal or to the board president, and then I can distribute them to the board and the proper administrator. I would now like to invite the board members to go to their liaison school. Okay, we are back at the table from our work session, and do any board members have any further questions for Mr. Reuter or Mr. Cohn?
I'll just make kind of a statement, and hopefully I'm reflective of everyone up here. After talking with each principal, I think it's nice to hear that each one of you has a potential plan of looking year over year and what data that we can look at to continue to improve. And I think if we look specifically at building by building on the pieces of paper in front of us, we are a high achieving district, and I don't think anyone disputes that point. But there are pieces of data, and I know Nick and Chris can talk endlessly about this, but there are pieces of data that specifically show areas of growth that each building can improve on year over year. And I heard it from a lot of you, but not necessarily all of you, that I think if we hone in our focus on areas that we know that there can be simple growth, there's going to be growth in the end, right? If we take piece by piece and know that there's growth in area A, there's potentially going to be growth A to Z then, right? So I would push to each and every one of you that if we identify those smaller areas of growth in the totality, you can hopefully increase growth with everything else being held constant. And I would stress it to you to be vocal about it. We know we're not achieving in this area, we need to improve in this area. And it's one thing that I didn't necessarily hear that I would stress to you to be more open and transparent about it. We know we're not achieving in this area, we need to attack this area. But overall, we're a very high-performing district, and I think everyone knows that. And we should continue to preach that to everybody, but there is always room for improvement, and I would stress that to each and every one of you. So thank you.
I just wanted to ask, do the schools ever, like all the elementary schools, ever get together and talk about your experiences to see how you can improve? Yeah. Just like once a year, or is it just common to once?
Oh, we probably, we meet monthly, and as we develop our goals and our action plans, we do talk quite a bit about what we're seeing, and we talk a lot about what's successful in different schools, and we try to share that learning with each other, and we go to each other for solution seeking. We go to the district, we go to, the elementary, or the middle and high school as well, so, yes.
Any other questions? And how did the board like doing this kind of a experience?
I liked it.
I just want to encourage you, if you have any additional thoughts, just follow up with the individual principals that you met with this evening. You have in front of you the actual poster, so that you have that as a reference point. I'd like to thank the principals for coming out this evening and being a part of this process. And we are a high-achieving district. It's because of the leadership we have and the great teachers in the district. So we can be really proud of that and build on that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming, and drive safely. And thank you to Mr. Reuter and Mr. Cohn for your report. Thank you very much. Okay, next we'll move on to 8C, the Building and Grounds Annual Report with Mr. Cloutier. Okay. And Megan, for the record, Mr. Nielsen is leaving right now at 7:26.
Sorry, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you. I'm glad we
Talked
talked
earlier.
We did.
What'd you learn?
I like to think we also have a high-performing Buildings and Grounds Department in this district. We do strive for excellence in the Buildings and Grounds Department, and we look at things and always strive for continuous improvement, just like the rest of the district. We are an operational department, but we still have goals. So what I'd like to bring to you today, and I gave it to you in your packet, was the things that we've done this year, some of which aren't quite complete yet, and the things that we plan to do next year. So I did include a cover memo with an explanation. Some of the big ones were Ben Franklin's pavement. This will be the fourth school we've done in the last few years. Robinwood first, Pleasant View second, and now Southwood Glen, and now Ben Franklin. And as you can see, we ran into some hydric soils, as is pretty common in Franklin. So we added some drainage, we added some sidewalks, we widened some spaces, we created some spaces for snow storage, and it's working very well. And the pavement, it's one of those long cyclical items, as I've talked about the big three. Pavement's always one of them, that over time, it's a huge investment, and it's something we'll need to keep up on year after year. And as I said in my opening paragraph, you can expect it to start to repeat the cycle. I've been here for almost 25 years, and we've gotten through most of everything at this point.
What is the expected life of the replacement?
Of a
Yeah,
pavement?
Ben Franklin, yeah. The
Well-
grading, the asphalt you put there.
Well, I would say probably 20 years on that pavement. Pavement it's a long cycle item, but there's only, unless you break it up, schools, there's really only 8 sets of pavement. You know, eight buildings. So it's a long cycle item, but it has fewer pieces. HVAC or roofing has many pieces, so the cycle would repeat more consistently. With the addition of the new Forest Park, after we tear down the old one, we'll probably have about 14 acres of roof in this district. So if anyone ever asks me if the roof is leaking, the answer is typically yes. Somewhere in 14 acres, there's water coming into our buildings. But we manage it, and we take good care of it. And as you can see, we've weathered the flood of 2008, when I think we had to, the county complex couldn't provide for our graduation, but we were fine. Those kinds of things. So they are long, the big 3 are long cycle items, but again, HVAC and roofing has many more items within that repeating cycle. So Ben Franklin, we would hope it lasts 20 to 25 years.
How long has that school been there?
How long has that school been there? 99, so 18 years. Yeah, but the spec that I have, my expectations of the pavement section is much greater than that of what you might get in a normal. We've implemented it over here, but sometimes when you do that, you think you're doing it right, but you'll find pockets that'll sink or whatever, or mistakes that are made. It is earth that you're trying to control, and nature, and so that can be challenging sometimes. But 18 years, I'm fairly glad we got that much out of it. So, the high school Fab Lab, it's actually called the Accelerator Lab. I know we've talked to you about this once before. It's really starting to take shape as a dynamic space. It's got 3 different rooms. It's set up so that one teacher could supervise all 3 spaces. We have a 3D printing area, we have a computer lab, and we have the accelerator lab. We're still getting some of the materials and equipment for it, but we're moving forward, and it will support our STEM programs. I've been working with Mr. Cohn under his guidance.
And how many square feet is that? How many square feet is that space?
2, 3, 3,500 altogether. The accelerator lab is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 with a couple of ancillary spaces. The computer lab is about 900, and the 3D printer room is about 400. Does that help?
I was just looking at that $70,000 number and wondering what kind of square footage is that calculated to?
Sure.
Seems expensive, but I guess it's the windows or, and
Well,
the video cameras also are 11,000. How much is this one? Just trying to gauge the value of what we bought.
Well, it's IP cameras, so they're high-quality cameras where we can actually see what, where you can actually zoom in and see what's going on. It includes monitors in all 3 spaces so that I can see all 4 cameras in one place. And also, those 4 cameras are attached to the building system so that from an overall security standpoint, they're part of the overall building system of cameras. And we're up to about 75 cameras in the high school, and we're probably going to be adding some because we found some holes in some of the systems.
75 cameras there. Wow.
It's a very large building.
Okay.
It's about 8 or 9 acres in and of itself. And 1,500 kids who are going to be kids.
On camera.
So, moving on to Southwood Glen, as I mentioned, we're about 40% of that roof has been replaced. That roof is from '92, so it's about 25 years old. That was the original building. We've changed the spec a little bit to make it last longer the second time around. I wasn't here when the building was originally built, and so we moved forward on that piece. We have more to do, but right now the roof is stable. But we have more sections to do as we work our way around the building clockwise, really. And then the HVAC controls, by changing out the new head end, we've actually, not only is it going to work better, it's going to be more efficient, it's going to talk to each other, it's going to improve occupancy comfort. More importantly, we get to offload the proprietary vendor that we only could use his system, only could use his people to service it. So that's going to save us some money over time, because at that point, they have you're a captive audience, and so they can charge you whatever they want. So that's another good piece. The high school pool leak. So we saw we had a leak. We were using excessive amounts of water when we restarted it this year. And so, like I say in my report, we shut off the system, see how far the bucket leaks down. Well, it's a 225,000 gallon bucket. And so it takes a while, but you see how far it leaks down to the very bottom. So we fixed that one. And then we come to find out we have a second leak. This one's up at the top, up at the rim of the bucket, where the water actually goes back to the tank and to the filter tank. So we've had to fix that as well. So that was really, if you look on the report, that was really the 16,000 and then the 88,000. Yes, the 16,565 and the 88,000 was the second leak. It was much larger. It was around the perimeter of the building, of the pool.
So just, we did redo that pool area though, right, when we made it deeper, was that? This
Yes.
wasn't discovered then, and what investment was that? What kind of investment was that? Just roughly.
That was in the $250,000 range, but that was the only part of the pool that wasn't leaking, part of the rim that wasn't leaking. And it did not, the leaks were not connected. They were at opposite ends of the pool.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know if any of you have been past Brent Franklin earlier this spring, but you would have seen a rather dead-looking forest. The ash trees grow taller than the surrounding oaks and the maples, and then they all got emerald ash borer, and so as, you know, it was brought to my attention that we have a few dead trees out there, and when I drove past it, it was quite a few. And unfortunately, they stick out of the top, and it's a safety issue for the kids, so we took care of those. And yes, it was over $42,000, but it was worth it to clean that up and get those things out of there, and they were big ash trees.
Who did you contract to cut those down?
Local guy, AAA Tree Service.
Was there
Yeah.
any, I know it is a state forest, right? It's got special designation as a school forest. Was there any funding, state funding available to accomplish that? Or did we
Not
look
to my
at?
knowledge.
Okay.
It's really, yeah, it's pretty small, but yeah, there was a lot of ash trees in it.
And could the city have maybe helped us out with that?
It's our land.
Well, I'm saying,
I mean, we have one of the,
they're cutting down these same trees all over the city. Maybe stop by. Just asking.
$30,000.
Just asking.
Well,
They're gone. We can
yeah.
move on.
Yeah, okay. So, the high school sinks, as I mentioned, the architect, the slit sinks were small, other than a little bit longer, they were narrower than a piece of paper. And they tapered to the bottom. And so, it just made sense to change them. And yes, it was very expensive, but understand they are epoxy sinks that are glued into epoxy tops. And we needed to move some of the pieces around inside the cabinets to fit the new utilities. So that's why it was $70,000. But it was 28 sinks.
It was stated that the architects made the choice of those sinks originally,
That's what they specified, yes.
so we don't have that happening in the middle school, do
Oh,
we?
no, absolutely not.
No,
No, in
in
fact-
fact, we were looking at the new middle school and what would be put in there, and went over to talk to the high school teachers on how well they liked their setup. And that was the first we heard, that they did not like their setup at all, and it was the sink that was the problem. Had not heard of it before, and they showed us how it worked with what they were trying to do. It didn't work for them. So the first step was we needed to fix that. They couldn't do very well what they wanted to do with students, and then making sure that the new school had the larger sink as well, and not that small sink.
Next year. Next year, we really, I think, as much as I would love to do the air conditioning at the high school gym, I really think the heat at Countrydale is probably much more important. What we've been facing is the pipe failing. As I tried to explain, it's called channeling. The bottom of the pipe wears out because the condensate, which picks up minerals, rolls along that bottom, and it begins to foul the traps, which separate the water from the steam, and wear out the bottoms of the pipe. So a steam system is it's our only one, so we're going to convert it to hot water, but they're much more complicated and much more maintenance intensive. So that's why that's the project we're doing next year for $700,000. And then the other one would be the gym. It's been 10 years, and so it's time to sand that and bring that back up to snuff. And as I said, if we're currently running an experiment at Countrydale, that if Countrydale it has gas-fired units that blow out of the vents in the ceiling, and then it has steam baseboard around the perimeter of the classrooms. We've shut off the steam baseboard to see how it performs this year without it. So if we can eliminate the steam baseboard, I'm hopeful that we can also afford the high school gym. The good news about the high school gym is almost none of the work takes place in the gym itself to do that. So we could, if things go well at Countrydale, we can certainly do that during the school year with minimal effect on what happens in the building.
And what kind of energy efficiency can we expect for the $700,000 investment? 10% savings, or?
Oh, at least. But again, it's hard for me to quantify it because I'm not sure of the scope of the project yet and how much we're going to do. If we can eliminate the baseboard, it's going to be even higher than that.
And what do we pay for utilities there, offhand?
I'd have to look. I
Okay,
don't know that.
thought maybe you knew.
I guess, Mark, I'm just curious, what has been our investment so far over the past 10 years in Countrydale's system? Have we spent anything in updating that system other than installing the gas-fired furnaces on the ceiling? Specific to the steam system, have we spent any money on that system over the past 10, 15, 20 years?
We're repairing the pipes regularly, and some of the steam coils are wearing out in some of the actual units. So we've got one steam coil that he started to close off some of the tubes. You know, it's like a radiator. He started to close off some of the tubes because we can't get it to fix. So that steam coil is failing.
And how much are those normal fixes? How much are those typically running us?
Oh, that's where all the money is. That's why I want to eliminate the baseboard, because it's all that piping down in the tunnels.
Right, but how much are we spending on the coil replacing or pipe fixing? How much are we spending on that?
I don't have that number separated out. I mean, how much did we spend last year?
Yeah.
I really don't know on specifically what that would be. But again, as they begin to fail, it's time to replace them.
Okay, if you could come back with that number, I think 700 is fine if that's our next step. But if we say, let's say over the last 20 years, we've spent $100,000 fixing the system in 20 years, and we're going to spend $700,000 to update the system, it doesn't necessarily make sense if we can fix those pipes or those coils, whatever, and spend the same $100,000 over the next 20 years. It seems obviously that $600,000 can be used elsewhere, including at the high school and some other projects. If that number is closer to $700,000 that we spent over the last 20 so years, I think making the argument that spending $700,000 to update the system makes 100% sense. You know what I'm saying?
Correct. The challenge would be is that you really can't just continue to replace the pipes. I mean, fix the pipes, you're going to have to replace them. And that's probably a large portion of that $700,000. So you'd have to at least probably a third to a half of this investment.
But the 700 is just to remove the system and invest in the gas system, or is the 700 to update?
It's a hot water system, hot water boilers.
Instead of the current the steam system?
Current steam system. So it's a hybrid system now with some gas-fired units and the steam units. We're going to try to replace the steam units with hot water.
Okay, so I get 100% what you're saying, okay? And I would be 100% supportive of what you're suggesting, spending the $700,000. But give me some comparison of what we spent over the last 20 years, or what we could spend over the next 10 to 20 years, to justify saying we're going to spend $700,000 tomorrow to update the system. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
We can take a look at that. I think the thing is, we've done Band-Aids.
Which
So-
is fine. I just,
So we could
if
give
I'm
you
a
the-
taxpayer, I would just like an estimate of saying, well, I am a taxpayer. I would like an estimate of, this is what we spent over time. We're going to invest in $700K to save us X amount over the next 10, 15
Or
years.
is it
Right, I
at
think-
the end of its useful life?
Yeah,
Is it?
yeah.
I mean, is that what we're really saying?
The piping's from the 50s. The piping's
Yeah.
older than
Yeah.
me.
Right. So there is,
goodness.
comparing it
Yes.
to the past, comparing it to the past is saying, we did this little Band-Aid a couple of times. If you compare that to a new system, you would never say, let's go to the new system, but we can't keep doing the Band-Aids. We have to replace the system. So that's where it comes in. If it would make more sense if he would look to the future and say, we are gonna have to replace it, and this is how much the piping is.
Right.
For
That-
what you're looking for.
That's all I'm asking for,
Okay.
is some comparison
Yep.
instead of just the number of
Yes.
700K in front of me. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Because I think you're kind of asking, what's the cost avoidance?
Correct.
700 now and have a new updated system versus,
Frozen pipes during January or.
or what it
chemicals.
would take to not just Band-Aid, but make incremental changes so that over time it would be updated. And, you know,
Ultimately, I trust
Having-
your judgment, and I guarantee
Yeah.
the number is probably going to come back and say it's going to cost us more over time to maintain at our current level than it is to spend 700K this year, but I don't have that in front of me, so I can't necessarily say I agree with it or not.
Okay, so, but to answer your point, Mr. Gamble, it's like converting a car from diesel to gasoline. You can't just replace the manifold.
Right.
You have to replace the whole ball of wax. So we couldn't really do it incrementally over time unless we stuck with steam, and we don't want to.
Okay.
Steam is just too complicated and too maintenance intensive, and the upkeep on it is heavier. The chemicals, we spend a few $1,000s a year on chemicals.
so right there, you're telling me that the cost is going to be higher if we did want to go with steam and try to keep that system alive.
Correct. Over time, yes. Maintenance and everything else is heavier on a steam system. And it's harder to operate, requires more time from our guys to spend with it, blowing down
Yep.
and watching the chemicals.
And it's 1950s technology.
Yes.
Are there no more steam systems anywhere?
No, our pipes are from 1950.
All right.
But no, they still make steam boilers. And they also use them mainly at this point, mostly for process steam, which would be to, like, steam turbines at the electric company, things like that nature. But yeah, there's still steam out there.
Okay. We can talk steam later.
So are there any other questions?
So we're planning on $750,000 then for maintenance projects in the next budget that we're going to see? Is that
Yes.
what I just heard?
Right.
Well, and this year we spent 1.4?
Yes.
So how did the budget work then? Are we cutting down the budget this year, or did we spend more than we budgeted?
We'll still budget more than $750,000 because there will be other things that we'll end up doing during the year that aren't necessarily planned or huge projects. This year was a particularly big year for extra things when you throw the pool in there at $100,000 and then the sinks and the trees is another $100,000. And you look at each one of these things as they come up. Some of them are affecting student learning, some of them are liability or safety issues. So the list got a little bit longer this year than it was in previous years. But we'll still budget more than what we're showing on here for next year so that we can get those things done.
And then this is the universe of the list of future projects?
The universal list has universally shrunk
Thank you.
from last time. So the first thing we did was take all of the current Forest Park things off of the list, all of the future additions and all of that. Certainly if something goes wrong, we'll fix it. But we took it off the list. So that eliminated, I don't know, it was like $30 million maybe off of the list. And then we took off some of the big things that would not fit in this budget anyway, like the purchase of future land, big additions to buildings, all of that. We'll come back with another list to you of those things in kind of an order of
Yeah, I do see
most
5 million on
important.
the list for land purchase.
Mhm. Right,
Okay.
right.
So you're gonna work the list a little bit more.
Right, the list as you have it now is really maintenance items that could come out of that maintenance budget, and what you'll get is another list that's big capital items and purchases that's kind of separate, things that Mark can't get out of $700,000. If he could get a $5 million purchase out of $700,000, I'd let him do it.
I think just another point of reference, so if we looked at the big picture with the numbers, if you look at that list, it says estimated cost for the conversion of steam boilers is $550K, and then it says 18, 19, $700K. So if
We
you
went
can,
deeper into it.
if you can just lay out the numbers in expected cost over time to make that walk the line of what we expect easier, straightforward, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Just one, so it's 2.5, right? Actually, I was mixing my list up because I pulled last year's list at this time.
Yeah.
I thought that was the current list, but now this is the current list. It's only
The
2
gallon
point,
did universally shrink at this
it's only 2.5 million, so the list could be gone in 2 years?
Assuming
just
nobody
saying.
wants, nothing changes.
I just want to know what's
Not with
possible.
Country Dale School, I would doubt that.
Yeah, I think the foreshadowing here was starting up that big 3 again and the replacements, the rooftop units and all of that will affect this before this list is gone. But we are doing, and that's one of the reasons to get it down to this, so we can see what is maintenance only. So we're suddenly doing very well.
So, but is the air conditioning in the high school gym maintenance only? You know, why is this the year we're doing air conditioning in the gym? After all these years? Why is this the year?
It's one of the biggest complaints we get.
Well,
is
I
that
know we
gym is just
complain
slow.
about it, but I guess this is the year we're doing it because we can afford it, or?
It's an alternate on the list. If we could afford it, we would put it in. It's not on the list. But if the next chance we get, that would be a project we would like to do.
The ceiling of the concessions and restroom floors at the high school?
Yes.
Wasn't that done originally? When,
We originally was just bare concrete. So it did not perform very well. We couldn't clean it very well. It wasn't very sanitary, so we sealed the floors this year.
okay. Are there any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next is 8D, the Forest Park Construction Report. Mr. Moser.
Yes. For the past 2 months, most of the work that's gone on out there has been below ground. So there's a lot of driving around and digging and dirt moving around, but there hasn't been a lot to look at. And now, I don't know if you could see it, maybe it was dark when you got here, but the walls are starting to go up. We had an initial permit from the city to do everything below ground, and then we turned in all of our drawings and so forth to get our permit to build the walls, and it took about 8 weeks to get that permit, but we finally got it, and so the walls are starting to go up. You can see the first wall there is the front of the music rooms that we looked at when we took the tour, and the sides are going up on that. After that, they'll move to the gym. You'll see a really huge crane out there for a week or two, 2.5 times the size of the crane we have out there now to lift the walls of the gym in, which are pre-poured concrete slabs with everything in it. So they're 12 feet wide by 36 feet high. They're extremely heavy, but that'll come together real quickly with them putting that in, and then the steel will go on over the top of that in January before our next meeting at the end of January. So it's moving quickly once they get out there. They've encased areas in plastic to keep them warm. If you see you'll see a wooden structure out there on the other side of the fence that's not part of the building. They call that the mud shack. And it's where they mix up their concrete, so they keep that heated in there. They're storing block in there to keep it warm before they install it, so that they can work all winter long on that. And once they get a little farther, they're going to bring in another crew, and things will move even more quickly than they have already. The good thing is we're getting out of the ground and all of that, the issues that are possible with the earth and footings and all of that, we're beyond them. They have 3 concrete pours left to do on the footings, and then they'll be done. Let's see.
How does the cold affect the pouring of the footings? Does it?
No, they cover them and they pipe heat into that too. If you go out there, it's all black plastic, and then they have lines coming in and they keep that going all day and night to keep that warm. We were out the other day walking out there. We were in the music area, and all of that slab is all poured already. All the flooring is down, and it looks really good. And they poured that when it was cold as well. So they're very good at what they do. When you watch, they're doing everything right. They have all the practices in place, and it's just what they do. That doesn't faze them at all. It's, when you look at it, it's like, wow, it's working through winter like that. And well, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We do that every year. It's all right. And that's kind of how they approach it, and they have all the equipment to do it, so it works out pretty well. We went into that mud shack out there to look around, and it was noticeably warmer in there from outside. So it works real well for them. There's pictures on our website. Every 2 weeks we update those pictures, and they have, it's written on there what it is that you're looking at. So that's a good way to keep track of it if you don't like walking around on a construction site in the cold. I think the last thing I'd say is we did have some high school students that got involved with this from the Inroads program, and I met them at a meeting over there that we had on the construction site, and Megan's put together a little video showing how that came about, and we thought we'd show that to you now.
Our Inroads program at the high school is really for students who are looking for a different way of learning and exploring their passions. Our students that are currently in our field study course are juniors. That course really centers around what it's like to work in a professional setting, or what careers actually look like out in the real world. We had a small group, about 7 students, who had identified they had a potential career interest in architecture.
From the beginning, I always had an interest in building things, taking things apart, and I knew I wanted to go into some sort of engineering.
Yeah, I joined Inroads because I was always interested into engineering and stuff like that. So kind of wanted to explore everything with help me find what certain area of engineering I wanted to pursue.
I would like to be a special car bike specialist one day. I think it would be fun to explore that career.
I connected with PRA, and they said, yes, we would love the opportunity to show these students around, show them what we do, and give them a first-hand look at the planning and construction of the new middle school site.
We were very excited to have the opportunity not only to show them the same walkthrough that we showed with the school board, but we also were able to put on a pair of virtual reality goggles, and a bunch of the students were, putting those on and looking around, and all the other students were laughing in the background, seeing what they were walking into.
Give us different ways to look at it. They put us through the virtual reality, which let us stand inside and basically explore the school firsthand, so we can see how it would be standing inside the school before it's even built up.
Just seeing the new design, it has a lot more open concept, and it's more commons areas like we have here. And I think my favorite part of the design was their main commons / lunchroom area. People are going to be able to eat lunch, study. It's really set up like a college would be instead.
And that's what I like too, because we had that here.
Because not only did we actually get to see new and modern designs for a school, we also got to tour the actual building itself, like where all the progress is being made, and just seeing all like the work that actually goes into it. Beforehand, you just see a big just grass field, and then afterwards you see a giant school, but you never really get to see like what's the build-up process for that. Well, while we were there, it actually was kind of cool because they're continuing to dig holes for the foundation of one of the rooms. First, they start with tape measure, then they make little marks with like a little crowbar, and then that's like the starting point, and then they bring in the big cranes to actually dig up all this dirt, and I found that quite interesting. Overall, it was just a fun experience. I enjoyed PR Architects probably more than other job shadow because I actually got to do more with people there. I actually got to engage more.
Is that video on the website also?
I'd love to put it on the website, yeah.
That's great.
So that concludes my report.
Will there be any, if we should get a lot of snow, I heard it's going to be more cold than snow, is there enough room to push the snow around outside?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big site, and the building doesn't take up all of it, so they'll have room for that.
And the dirt pile stays till we're done using what we might need, or?
Yeah, it'll come and go. It's being trucked away
it is being trucked away?
at different times, taking some of it away, and only what we need to, they call it balancing the site, will be left there for what we need once the current forest park is taken down.
Oh, so that's, okay. That'd be a while.
Thank you. Item 8E is the board clerk's report, spring election notice. Mr. Alexandrovich.
The notice of the school board election, I'll read it for you. Notice is hereby given that there is an election to be held in the school district of Franklin on Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018, and the following offices are to be elected to succeed the present incumbents listed. The term of the office of school board member is 3 years, beginning on Monday, April 23rd, 2018. The office is school board member, and the 3 incumbents are Janet Evans, Larry Gamble, Jeff Lewis. Notice is further given that a campaign registration statement and a declaration of candidacy must be filed no later than 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd, 2018, in the office of the school district clerk, 8255 West Forest Hill Avenue. Notice is further given that if a primary is necessary, the primary will be held on Tuesday, February 20th, 2018. That's the notice.
Thank you. And then item 8F, the treasurer's report is available in the board docs library. And we'll move on to 9 school board liaison reports. We have 9A, the personnel and policy number 5314, medications. It's an action item. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you. I don't know if Dr. Miller, if you want to do some introductions, I can read the statement as needed, if you'd like to start there.
Well, we have with us this evening our school nurses because we'd like to recommend a revision to our policy regarding the administration of how do you say the drug's name?
Naloxone.
Naloxone, Narcan. Per state statute, we have been provided the authority to have that drug and administered to our students. So this evening, our nurses are here to talk about doing that and then therefore revising our policy. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Cull and Ms. O'Neill to do that. Thank you.
Great, thanks guys. Thank you so much for letting us come back tonight. Hope you guys all had the opportunity to check out the revisions to the policy that we're proposing and some of the attached information to help kind of justify why we're proposing adding that addition of naloxone administration to the rules of the policy. It was potentially a little bit confusing because the whole policy was struck through for revision. The majority of that, and if you guys saw in our memo, was due to a lot of organizational and formatting changes. The biggest content change would be and really the only significant content change in there would be the addition of stocking naloxone at the middle school and high school for rescue medication.
And we started that discussion with Dr. Miller in April, I believe. Legislation was introduced in February in the state of Wisconsin to allow schools to stock this. The law passed in July, so the discussion has continued, and we've been working with community partners and people to, inform us and choose to do this for the safety of our students.
Thank you. For reference, the Wisconsin statute is 118-29-2G, which does state that a school employee may administer an opioid antagonist to any pupil or other person who appears to be undergoing an opioid-related drug overdose if, as soon as possible, the school bus administrator, bus operator, employee, or volunteer reports a drug overdose by dialing the telephone number 911, or in an area which the telephone number 911 is not available, the telephone number for an emergency medical service provider. So with those edits, as you can see in the text of the policy, the plain text of 5314 has been edited, basically just frankly brought up to date, while the majority of the edits have been included in the administrative rules, as well as the separate attached emergency action plan for suspected overdose, which details the Narcan administration procedures. So with that, at least I will make a motion to approve the updated medication policy 5314.
We have a motion by Mr. Lewis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Witkowski. Any discussion?
And who pays for the Narcan? How do you get it? Who pays for it?
We were going to take it out of our budget. When we looked at cost effectiveness, it is not very expensive to get it.
It's around $35 a dose.
Is the state providing it though, or is there any
Not
program?
yet. They're providing the injectable form right now through different programs. However, it's more complicated to administer, and it's actually not as quick acting as the inhaled nasal form that we're planning on using. So the cost benefit doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us.
And the shelf life of this is?
About a year and a half.
Year and a half?
Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, some of the manufacturers would look to provide those to schools, like some of the manufacturers do for epinephrine.
So both of you will be trained in accordance to DPI's requirements. Okay. And then according to the according to the sheet,
The suspected overdose action plan?
just trying to see where I read it. According to one of these here, it said, we can administer it to anyone that's at the school during academic hours.
Correct.
So that would be even if a parent is in the school.
Correct.
Okay. And specifically, our academic hours are going to be school bell hours.
Correct.
So staff is going to, they'll know this.
We'll have to communicate that. This is a little bit different than like an EpiPen, which we might have on a football field. We're limiting this right now to the academic school day because of the training issues involved here and the access to the drug. So, but we can be clear about communicating that to employees.
Can individuals, you can buy that now, right?
Mm-hmm. The chief medical officer for the Division of Health of Wisconsin passed a standing order that anybody is authorized without a prescription to go to a pharmacy and ask
Good.
for naloxone.
And what if students brought their own? That would be allowed?
Well, that's not on our medication list,
Right.
that you can bring that.
I think something we may have to come across considering at some point is that There are occasions, and off the top of my head, I can't think of one that would currently apply, that physicians are recommending to certain individuals who are at a higher risk for overdose. Say there's an individual who has a known addiction to painkillers. They're recommending to them that they do carry naloxone on them, which is part of why it's becoming increasingly available to people. So if it was a physician-authorized medication, that would be a little bit of a different circumstance potentially.
I know some cities are offering training to citizens, like Greenfield's having one next month, and it's offered by the AIDS Resource Center. And I think Oak Creek had one offered by Milwaukee
Waukesha County offered it to all their employees.
And I just want to acknowledge that we have our health nurse in the
Yes,
audience, Lauren Luby. She's
Yep, Lauren is the coordinator for Volition Franklin. So we've been working with her. So we are grateful that she's here and is supportive of this work.
Volition is FAPSU, former FAPSU, so both Ms. Evans and I have been working with that group quite a bit, and I think this partnership is important, so thank you for attending today. The drug is harmless, really, in
Correct.
terms of if it were administered to someone or someone used the drug,
So
it would cause no harm, is
Right.
what I understood, but you, of course,
Yeah.
are the medical.
So the mechanism of action for this drug is if someone were to receive it that did not have opioids in their system, nothing would happen. It binds to the same receptors as opioids do, so it is really a harmless medication unless you have opioids in your system.
Which is why our administration protocol is so seemingly loose, because if we have someone who's unresponsive, who is potentially not breathing, and we have no other rationale medically for why that would be happening to them, the risk to them for us to not administer far outweighs the risk of us administering and finding out that they weren't suffering from an opioid overdose.
We worked with Chief Remington at the Franklin Fire Department with this. He has seen this protocol. The discussion with him has been happening for the past few months. We also worked with the Chief of Emergency Medical Services for Milwaukee County, who is also a physician at Children's and Freighter in the emergency department. He has seen this protocol and is supportive of the work we're doing as well.
We may be one of the first districts now moving forward with this, although I think that other districts will. It's just something that's been on our radar, and we've, I believe, done the right research and are making the right decision moving forward.
So the only other statement question I have is, obviously, the statute provides some protections for administering Narcan. Is this a policy that would need or preempt notice to any insurance provider of the district?
I would defer to Mr. Milzer, who does manage our liability policies, and he and I could discuss that further to determine if that's needed.
The only issue I see with the protection is that it says, the state statute says you must call 911. So I think that really has to be stressed to our employees.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a consistent communication, that the process is, one, call for help, including 911. Two, as it's laid out on the Narcan sheet, administer CPR, last resort, administer Narcan.
And with any rescue medications, when we do training for emergency response teams, you're going to be calling 911.
Is this the first time that we're purchasing any kind of medication for, otherwise students bring their own, right? This is the first time that we are.
Do we purchase
The
EpiPens?
we have.
The EpiPens we received free through the EpiPens for Schools system.
So we obtain them.
Okay, so this is
We've considered in the past if we would potentially need stock in glucagon, which is the rescue medication for students with diabetes, but they are very reliable so far in providing us with their own rescue medication, so that hasn't been necessary. But that would be the other one that there's not a lot of, if we ever needed to obtain it, there's not a lot of state funding or programs for that.
Have we had any cases of 911, of emergency services coming to school for Narcan?
So we've not The Franklin Fire Department used it 42 times last year.
I mean,
None of them were in district.
Yeah, that's what my question was.
Yes.
Okay. And then as far as record keeping, you know, I noticed in here you have to keep a log or records. So is that to send into the state, or is that just for our purposes? So that when you do your yearly report, we would have a report on that?
Yep.
Okay.
The partnership we kind of have with the Chief of Emergency Medical Services for the county is very interested in if we would be using it just for his own benefit in educating others in the community, what did that scenario look like? So had asked if it happened. He would just be curious, you know, not specifics, but scenarios.
Is there any, I'm reading this, that the call for help 911 ensure CPR is initiated as appropriate and then administered Narcan. Okay, someone initiates CPR. How many compressions? 2, 3? I mean, what is appropriate before you give the drug?
So their priority should be CPR, and we'll emphasize this in our training for the medication. The way the Chief Medical Officer of Emergency Services worded it to Lori and I is, and this is understanding this is what they do all day long, you could just ventilate whoever is unconscious and give them breaths for as long as you want to, and you're going to keep them alive. The Narcan is going to reverse it, so it's really a focus on good, adequate CPR above the Narcan. The Narcan does take some time, so they may be doing CPR on someone for several minutes before the Narcan would start to work, depending on how the person responds to the drug, because every individual responds a little bit differently. Could be anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes before they start to breathe on their own.
But somebody could be doing compressions of CPR and somebody could be administering the Narcan.
Okay, but you just need to initiate it.
Yes, correct.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay. Back to the policy. Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lewis and a second by Mrs. Witkowski to approve, where is that policy? The revision of policy 5314. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Well, yeah, 5-0, 2 absent. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Drive safely.
Okay, then we'll move on to 9B, board liaison reports. Do we have any liaison reports tonight?
I did make a trip and get to visit Southwood
Okay,
Glen.
that's school visits.
Okay.
So first, let's do liaison reports.
I will be attending the Education Foundation meeting tomorrow morning. We'll see where they're at after their, I think, successful gala. I don't know, did anybody go? Yes? Was not able to attend, so.
Oh, yeah, it was fun.
Okay.
I got a great basket. A really great basket. So, yeah, it was good.
And I went to all the concerts last week.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
That's a liaison report. If you want to talk about that.
Okay, yeah, I'll shift gears here. Last week I had a chance to attend all the choir concerts, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th at Sabre Center. And I really have to applaud not only the kids that are in these choirs, but the teachers that are mentoring and coaching them and how to use their voice, everything from the kindergartners to 2nd graders, it's that really raw voice, but it's so angelic, all the way to high school and Forest Park Middle School. I looked a bit for the concerts of the week. The choir at Forest Park Middle School blew me away. There are kids with some awesome vocal talent, and when they get up to the high school level, it'll be amazing what they'll be able to do with tonal range and voice control.
That's good.
Mr. Gamble went every night last week to a concert.
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was just one event.
Every
Just
night.
kind of lined up.
On Monday, the 4th, Robinwood, Tuesday, the 5th, Countrydale, those were kindergarten, 2nd grades. The 6th was the high school choir, and the 7th was the middle school choir. And kudos for the high school choir. I'm not sure if they were prompted, but Student Initiative, I think it was the a cappella choir, actually came out to the foyer area and were on the stairway as you come into the Saber Center. And after they got done warming up, they were singing different Christmas carols and holiday songs as people were arriving.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
I did attend the Shakespearean play at the high school. Kind of, I thought it was real Shakespeare. And I would say that the kids, you know, memorizing and performing that was, got to be tough. And I do plan to attend the band concert at the, no bands, I didn't hear any bands, but I do plan to attend the Ben Franklin band concert next Monday. And I'm doing the Forest Park breakfast on Friday. So it's going to be a while since we meet again, the holidays. It's be a new year before we talk again, so.
Yeah. And I volunteered several half-days at Country Dale School last week for their Scholastic Book Fair, and it was a real positive experience, and the kids are really excited to read and especially to spend money, do their own little shopping. And the kids at Country Dale, and I'm sure they are at all schools, but they were so darn polite. It just, how are you, how's your day going, and, have a wonderful day. And it didn't matter what age the kids were, they were just really polite. And then I attended the Pathways to the Future program at the high school, and I saw you with your little Reagan. I don't know how long you got to stay.
Not very long,
Yeah.
but long enough.
But, and Mr. Cohen, you did such a nice job with your introductions and your speech. That was very nice. And Mrs. Reach did a great job, too. And I attended the Defining Post-Secondary Options with the military, the apprenticeships, Wisconsin Technical College and the UW system, and Wisconsin private colleges, and then the college and career readiness skills for your career with Northwestern Mutual, Crohn's, Ascension, and Park Bank. And these presenters were all just so positive with the audience, and I thought the students were excited, and the parents that were there just were really enthusiastic about being there. So I thought it was successful. I think you did too.
It's great. It was a great event.
How many parents were there? I mean, it was limited, right? How many?
Yeah, I think the final number was somewhere around 350 total, parents and students.
It's not there.
So, anything else for liaison reports? Because then we'll move on to you first for school visits.
Okay. On the 21st, I visited South Wigland. Ms. Cody showed me around, and we stopped into several classes. One of the neat things about that visit was this particular day, it was when they have their big writing seminar for the morning. And so when we got to Miss Mauer's kindergarten class, she was finishing up reading a short story to the kids, and then they were starting to do their journals or their writing. Creative writing is what it was. And then we moved over to first grade with Miss Stack and Miss Ludwig, and then eventually over to the second grade room with Miss Irwin and Miss Bart. The one thing I want to point out, though, is we just had the presentation about how the kids are building their vocabulary and using words their way. And on this particular morning, I got to see how that worked at the kindergarten, in first grade, and in second grade, and see how they progressed and how it was really helping them put together their own little short stories that were more complex than a Dr. Seuss book by the time you're talking about a first and second grader. So that was really a nice observation. It kind of showed how Words Their Way is a good teaching tool, I think a great teaching tool. And then we finished out the morning over at the gym with Mr. Jarrett's PE class. And I don't know what he does to motivate these kids, but from the time they got there to the time they were ready to leave, it was just energy in motion. So kudos to Mr. Jarrett.
That's great. I had a school visit, actually a guided tour with Mr. Volo at the high school on the 13th of November, and we visited the Sabre Academy, where a group of students were reading about World War II, and then they told me about how they went to the breakfast with veterans. That was at the high school. They were really interested in World War II. And then we went to a chemistry class where they were studying nuclear chemistry, and then a biology class where they were working on DNA. And then we sat in a gold block and watched the saber roar, and then looked at the metals classroom. There wasn't a class in session, but I got to see all the neat areas that will have the metals class in there. And then I was in the class with the interns from the accelerator lab, and Mr. DeBellick said he'd like the board to come and visit with him, like we did with the Provost Art students, so possibly have a board retreat. And I think that would be nice if we'd like to do that. Each of these interns, they're certified, so they've got this little laser imprinted card that they made with all their certifications, so they can go around to the rooms and help out all the teachers that need to use the printers and things like that. And even one of the boys that was working on a project for a 3D printer, he had never used a computer before this class, ever. And it was just really interesting to watch him figure out how to use a 3D printer after never using a computer before, so.
Yeah, a phone though, right?
That I didn't ask, but never a computer.
Or his Chromebook?
He said, never a computer. So it was, and I want to say about Mr. Volo, every student he went up to in a class, he was totally engaged. And, he'd come down on their level, when they were sitting, and go up to them and just really get involved with what they were doing. I was really impressed.
What are you doing?
Yeah, he just really engaged, so it was very nice. So, any other reports? All right, well, thank you. And then, future agenda items. We have the athletics and activities report for January 10th. School presentation from Forest Park Middle School on January 10th. The open enrollment seat approval, which is an action item on January 10th, and then also we'll have the resolutions for WASB.
What about the calendar?
That's on there too. We don't have everything that's on the agenda.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah,
Right.
Just a few things we put here.
The
Calendar will be there.
Just a question, athletics and activities report, do we always get that, or is this,
No,
this is
it's
not the
brand
rec,
new.
this is
No,
brand new?
this is
I
brand
thought
new.
I recognized, it didn't say new, but just checking.
Yeah, and we're writing policy,
But we're doing what?
writing policy around athletics and activities. So as part of the report, there'll be policy work. We've never had a policy, and it is a recommended policy by WASB.
Oh, okay.
As discussed previously, we're doing work with the athletic and activities code as well.
I think that she'll speak to that when she's here.
So then item 11, school board debriefing. Any comments?
It seems like it's been a while, but a packed agenda.
Yeah, a lot of
Everything
work.
was all informative. Thank you.
A lot of work.
Good.
Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Witkowski,
Second.
second by Mr. Gamble. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:27. And drive safely and Merry Christmas to everyone.
The poinsettias are for you to take home.
Are they real?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they're real.
Thank you very much.
I forgot your birthday, but here you go.